Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dante Fortson here. We're going to be talking about Egypt, America, the United States of Egypt. But before we get to that, make sure you guys hit the thumbs up as you come in. Make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'm breaking this into two parts. So you want to stay tuned for the second part, and you definitely want to stay tuned till the end because it's going to be worth it. I promise you, the ending of this is going to be worth the wait. And make sure you click the notification bell so you don't miss part two. You want to turn on all notifications. There we go. All notifications, and you want to turn on all your new YouTube notifications as well. Last but certainly not least, share this. We are about to be going in, and I think you guys should definitely share this while we're live, and if you're watching this later, you should definitely share this anyway, even if you missed the live. We're about to go in, and I want to take my time with it because there's a narrative being pushed as if we're the crazy ones for associating Deuteronomy 28 and the mention of Egypt with America. Like I said, the end is going to be worth the wait. Now, if you guys don't have your copy of Undeniable, Full Color Evidence of Black Israelites in the Bible, please go grab your copy. It's available at Barnes & Noble. It's also available on Amazon.com. And if you prefer to read digital, it's available at the Apple Store, Google Play, pretty much everywhere digital books are sold. Secondly, today's presentation, the United States of Egypt, is brought to you by the Royal Judah Shoe. If you don't have your pair already, make sure you go grab you a pair. If you put your email address in the box that pops up, you will receive a discount code. So go grab you a pair of Royal Judahs. Now, if you want to support, you can do so at any time. Patreon.com/Dante Fortson. Patrons get a lot of stuff first. If you want to support it anytime during the week, cash tag BHITB on Cash App. And of course, while we're live, you can click the $ and you can drop something in the super chat. Last video, the super chat button was disabled. What happened was the Martin Luther King video that I put in, at the end of it, there's a song owned by Sony, and Sony tried to give me a copyright strike, but I didn't play that portion of the video, so it's in dispute right now, and it looks like it should go in my favor because I did not play the copyright strike part or the copyrighted music part, and they don't own the rights to Martin Luther King's speech, so I should be in the clear there. But this time we should be good. Hopefully, if the ending of this don't get me in trouble. If you guys want to support, you can jump in the super chat by clicking the $. PayPal link is in the description, and so are the crypto wallets for those of you who want to bless me with crypto. Shout out to those of you who were dropping Bitcoin in the wallet. I'm not sure if it was one person or several people, but some people did support via Bitcoin. Shout out to you guys. All right, here we go. We're gonna get started on this Deuteronomy 28. Now, Deuteronomy 28 is the blessings and curses. So a lot of you guys know this, and I'm only mentioning it for those that don't know. Verses 1 through 14 are the blessings. Verses 15 through 68 are the curses. If Israel did what they were supposed to do, they were going to get the blessings from God. And if Israel did not do what they were supposed to do, God was going to curse them. People think that because Israel broke the contract, that nothing happens after that. Everything is null and void. No, God said, if you break the contract, I'm going to do these things to you. So the contract being broken on Israel's side then activates God to do what he said he's going to do on his side. Now, part of those curses, at the end of them, there's a redemption. But when we get down to verse 68, as part of the curses, this is the part I want to focus on because they like to focus on this. They act as if the entire belief of Deuteronomy and black people fitting the curses, one, they lie and claim that it's a One West doctrine. And then two, they lie and act like the entire belief system is built off of this one verse. It's not. It's built off of all the curses, which is why you will see them deflect and distract from the conversation by making these claims. they don't want to go through curse by curse to talk about whether or not it fits the black experience in America from slavery until now. They know if they do that, then they have to explain how it doesn't fit, because that's their narrative. It doesn't fit. But when you go curse by curse, you find out it does fit, and you can go through black history and see that it fits. Now, this other false teaching, this false doctrine, whatever you want to call it, this lie that they push, is that this is One West doctrine, that One West made up Deuteronomy 28 in the interpretation. We know that's not true. Go watch Beyond Deuteronomy, episode number 8. In there, I think the title of it is 400 Years of Interpreting Deuteronomy 28. In that video, I point out a source in which Europeans interpret it the same way as Israelites do, and Europeans had been doing it since the 1600s. And you have these Israelites that say, well, they don't believe Deuteronomy 28 fits the transatlantic slave trade, and yet you'll find Europeans, they're not trying to fit it to the transatlantic slave trade, but they're trying to fit it to modern experiences of the people they believe to be Jews. So they were trying to fit Deuteronomy 28 into their present day knowledge. So they looked at it as prophecy, just like many Israelites look at it as prophecy. And so we see that this narrative that they want to push, that it started with One West, is just an outright lie, unless they want to say that One West has been around since 1600s, which would also kill their lie that this whole movement started with Crowdy and Cherry. And we know that's a lie because we have seen the documents, Cambridge and others. If you go watch my my last video, yes, some slaves thought they were Israelites. We know that it started, we're not even gonna say started with Prosser. Prosser was one of the earliest teachers of black people being Israel, and he was executed in October of 1800, and he had been teaching that since the 1700s. So either way it goes, they get exposed as liars, the people that are in opposition to this, simply because they hate black people. There's no other reason. They don't act this way when anybody else makes the claim. And so a lot of this, we're going to look at their behavior, but I don't want to get sidetracked. So now we're going to talk about Deuteronomy 28:68. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to talk about a couple of things. Now, I'm saying everything that I'm saying to draw attention to something, to set it up for the end. Trust me, you guys want to see the end of this. Make sure you share this. Make sure you thumbs up this. You guys are going to want to see this end. You're going to want people to see this ending. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, many of us have enough common sense to understand that means no man shall redeem you. Nobody's going to save you out of this. This is why we're looking for the return of Christ. We're looking for the Most High to deliver on his promises, to deliver Israel from bondage, because no man can save Israel out of their punishment, because it is a punishment from God. So now, some people, including myself, believe this reference to Egypt to not be literal Egypt. Again, we do not believe it's literal Egypt, and that's not all Israelites. Some Israelites disagree with us. And see, this is the problem too with lumping people together. They are intentionally and deceptively trying to lump everybody together in order to make it easier on themselves to deny the truth. So when they say that everybody's teaching One West doctrine, even the Messianics, they're lying, they're deceiving, they're manipulating, because this didn't start with One West. As I mentioned, go watch my video, 400 years of teaching Deuteronomy 28, and it shows that Europeans interpreted and taught it the same way that many Israelites, including myself, do. We just disagree on who we believe the people are. All right, now I'm gonna give you guys some breakdowns here. Eat the meat, spit out the bones, whatever. This ain't doctrine. I'm just showing you guys some interesting observations. They like to, say everything is a doctrine. And again, just the narrative they push. All right, Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. All right, so now we say that Egypt, let me come over here, is Mizraim. well, we don't say it. The Bible says, I say it that way. Right here, it's Mizraim, right? So Mizraim is one of the sons of Ham. So it can, let me just bring this up. I already pulled all this stuff up just because the internet was acting crazy. All right, so Mizraim 47:14, and right here 47:14, Mizraim is translated as Egypt. So right here, proper name of a territory and people. A son of Ham, also his descendants and their country in northwest Africa. All right, so we see that it refers to Mizraim. Now, the reason some people say I'll say including myself, believe it could refer to somewhere other than literal Egypt is because in the Bible we find Egypt referred to as the house of bondage. And it's interesting if you read it in that context. I'm not saying you have to. And the Lord shall bring thee into the house of bondage again with ships. And so that ships part stands out. But people act like Deuteronomy 28 is the only place we see this reference to ships happening in the Bible. But we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so Mizraim is Noah's son. I'm sorry. Noah's son. I'm sorry, Ham's son, and Ham is Noah's son. Yeah, there we go. So Mizraim is Ham's son, and Cush is a brother of his, and you hear Berean say he's a Cushite all the time, right? So somehow Cushites look like Berean, but Mizraim, they look like everybody. All right, so anyway, the house of bondage. All right, so out of the, let me read this. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by the strength of the hand of the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. So again, we see that reference to Egypt as a house of bondage. We're not gonna read all these. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself. I'm excited about the ending. Let me compose myself. I think the ending is gonna be real good. All right, Exodus 20, verse 2. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And so we see this right here, all throughout Deuteronomy 13:5. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he hath spoken to turn you away from the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust thee out of the way which the Lord thy God commanded thee to walk in. So shall thou put the evil away from the midst of thee. And then in Judges 6:8, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, which said unto them, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up out of Egypt and brought you forth out of the house of bondage. All right, so many people, including myself, point out that Egypt is interpreted or not interpreted. Egypt is referred to as the house of bondage. And so we point out that it makes sense that if this is a prophecy, which it is saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. And we've gone over this, Deuteronomy 31. Moses says this is going to happen in the latter days, and they will be consistent with the latter days. Many people in opposition to this will stay consistent to the latter days until you start pointing out stuff concerning Israel in the latter days that matches the black experience through slavery, not just America, but scattered all over the world. So this house of bondage thing it's an interesting occurrence. It's not 100% solid, nothing to build a doctrine off of. However, there's another verse right here in Isaiah chapter 18, verses 1 through 2. I find this to be an interesting set of verses because they fill in some interesting information. All right, y'all, make sure you hit that thumbs up. All right, so now we're going to read this. I'm going to take my time to get through this part. I want to make sure don't nobody misunderstand everything I'm about to say. I believe that God transcends people's doctrines, people's theological understanding, and the boxes we try to put him in and talk about how he moves or what he will or what he won't do. And people will say that the Bible's God's written word or revealed word. And then when you show them things in it, they immediately start to deny that could be real and that they could be living during that time that we're talking about. And so you ask them about the latter days. Many of them will say 70 AD until Christ comes back. And then you point out Luke 21:24, where he says that they shall be taken captive or led captive into all nations. And so they become slaves and scattered into all nations. And you ask, when between 70 AD and now do we find a worldwide slavery? And that's the transatlantic slave trade. It's the only one we can point to. And people are still in denial and say, well, that can't possibly be it. And then we point to Deuteronomy 28 and the curses. And they say, no, that can't possibly be it. And then you point to Deuteronomy 28 and they say, well, no, that can't be ships because it says Egypt. And so in their mind, God can only be referring to a literal Egypt. He can't possibly be referring to a place in the future that has nothing to do with the Egypt that they just came out of. So now in Deuteronomy 28, we have Israel being taken back to Egypt, or the house of bondage with ships. You don't have to believe it. That's just what I believe, that they are taken back to the house of bondage in ships. So when you get to Isaiah 18, and you guys can feel free to check the dates on this, Isaiah 18 was written before the book of Zephaniah, and that's important. Woe to the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And so most people have an idea of what Ethiopia is today. And I'm going to show you something in a second. Verse 2, that sendeth ambassadors by sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the water, saying, go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose lands the rivers have spoiled. So this nation who's shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. It's interesting that they would say Ethiopia. And later on in the book of Acts, I believe it's chapter 7, we see Stephen say that God would send them beyond Babylon. And then we see another verse that says he would send them beyond Damascus. But right here, he talks about a land shadowing with wings, which is beyond Ethiopia. Hold on, let me get a sip of water real quick. All right. So a land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. They send ambassadors by sea. They're not sending caravans across the land. They're not sending cars. They're not sending planes. They're sending ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out and trodden down, whose lands the river have spoiled. They're going to the Israelites. So why is that important? And remember, I mentioned Isaiah was written before Zephaniah. So you have these people, I'm emphasizing this for a reason, from the land shadowing with wings, which is beyond the river or waters of Ethiopia. We'll come back to that. I've actually done a full study on this. And in the book of Zephaniah, all right, in the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 10 through, we'll just read verse 10, because I don't want to, get into the whole thing. It says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed or scattered, shall bring mine offering. So without getting to all of this stuff, this is actually, if you come back up here, you see, woe to Jerusalem and the nations. But it talks about return to people of pure language and all that stuff. Now, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. So the descendants, or the daughter of his scattered or dispersed. How did they get back? How did they get beyond the rivers of Ethiopia? And the only explanation we could possibly see in scripture is that here in Isaiah, which was written before Zephaniah, is that there's this land shadowing with wings that sends ambassadors by sea to these people. And then all of a sudden, they're on the other side. They're beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Now, it gets even more interesting as we start to dig into some of the meaning behind Isaiah 18. All right, I went ahead and pulled up Isaiah 18:2 specifically in the Strongs. So now here's what's interesting about this. So they send ambassadors by sea. Let me read Isaiah 18:2 one more time. That sendeth ambassadors by sea, even in vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, saying, Go ye swift messengers to a nation scattered and peeled, to a people terrible from their beginning hitherto, a nation meted out, trodden down, whose lands the rivers have spoiled. Actually, you know what? Let me start at 1. All right, here we go. So we'll start at 1. Here is why. All right. Woe to the land shadowed with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. All right. So what we're going to see here, first thing I want to point out, Ethiopia. Well, I guess we'll start at woe. We'll start at woe real quick. Woe is just usually to draw attention to something. Usually something not good in scripture. Alas, ho there, woe. It's an attention grabber. I just wanted to point that out real quick. But this word right here is Cush, Ethiopia. So it's beyond the rivers of Cush. Some of y'all know exactly where I'm going with this. But beyond the rivers of Cush. Remember, Cush was a son of Ham. Mizraim is a son of Ham. So anyway. Oh, wait, I'm not sure why I closed that. There we go. All right, cool. I did open that second window. I thought I closed this one by accident. All right, so now they're going to send ambassadors. Ambassadors. Let's look at this word for ambassadors. Telling y'all, make sure y'all hit that thumbs up. The end of this is going to be good. Look how this word is translated. Pains, pangs, pains, pains, pangs, pains. Right here, only in Isaiah 18:2 is it translated as ambassadors. So now, in one verse in Deuteronomy 28:68, we have them being sent to the house of bondage in ships. And then when we get to Isaiah 18:2, we see that, hold on, pain, pangs, sorrow is being sent across the sea in vessels of bulrushes. Ambassadors, or pain, pangs, sorrow by sea is being sent to Israel. But let's keep going. All right. And this word sea right here. Now, straightforward reading, they send ambassadors, pains, pangs, sorrow by sea. Most people wouldn't stop to look at that. But if you look at that word used for sea, which we're going to do, of course, right here, 322. I'm not even going to Bayam, I believe. 32:20. 32:20. 32:20. Yam or yam. There we go. 32:20. Same word. As we can see, it's translated as sea 278 times, sea coast 5, south once, west 59, west side 4, so that's 63 times referring to west, western 1, that's 64 times, and then westward 12. That's 76 times it's translated as a word that refers to the west. That's why I'm taking my time with this. I'm trying to choose my words wisely here, just so people don't try to take this out of context. So, woe to the land shadowed with wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sendeth misery or pangs or pains or sorrow by sea, or from the west, or from the westward, or any of those words we saw that mean west. Now, at first, it may seem like I'm just reaching, but then you come over to a map like this. This is from Princeton.edu. This is a 1644 map, and you see something like this: the Ethiopian Ocean. So it's beyond the rivers or waters or streams of Ethiopia. And over here, but they come across the sea. Remember, they come across the sea. And what do we see right here? Hold on. Is that a ship coming across the sea? A ship coming across the sea? Are these ships coming across the sea from 1644, the Ethiopian or the Oceanus Ethiopicus? That's the only sea I see that's beyond the rivers of Ethiopia or beyond the waters of Ethiopia. But let's keep looking. This is 1644 map from Princeton. This is a 1710 map. Again, Princeton.edu. What do we see here? It now says the Atlantic Ocean. So between 1644, where you just have the Ethiopian Ocean here, you come over here at 1710, and now you have the Atlantic Ocean and the Ethiopian Sea. You don't see the ships on here anymore, do you? But look at Ethiopia. Go find a map of modern day Ethiopia. Now look the size they believed Ethiopia to be back then. So it had to come from beyond here, at least, and across the sea. Ethiopia is not, well, then was not, it was not the same size as it is now, nor does it look like it's the same location, at least how they chose to depict it. Down here we see ships, we see ships, we see ships. So they came across the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, you know, where the transatlantic slave trade took place. And so if we continue looking, because I don't want to get too much into this, we might look over here towards, I just want to show you guys a notation on this map real quick. I am credibly informed that the country about 100 leagues north of the coast of Guinea is inhabited by white men, or at least a different kind of people from the blacks who wear clothes and have use of letters, make silk, and some of them keep the Christian Sabbath. And this is the slave coast, and we find Witta and Fida and Judah right here. Now, this reference to white men, if you guys go watch, I think it's the video, albinos were called white men. I believe that's the name of the video. If you guys go watch that, we have evidence, historical evidence, that West Africa was full of albinos. It says albinos were common among the people, and the people there called them the white men. So when it says white people on this map, or white men on this map, white doesn't necessarily mean white. We know that. We know the other side likes to run with black doesn't necessarily mean black, but we actually have a historical document in which albinos were called white men. So we know that white in West Africa doesn't necessarily mean white. So when somebody tries to show you something and say that people were white in West Africa, just know that sometimes not even sometimes, they called the albinos white men. So sometimes when they say white men, they may be talking about albino Negroes. So that's just for people coming in new to this. I just wanted to show you that notation on the map. So anyway, like I said, Atlantic Ocean, Ethiopian Sea. We're still talking about Isaiah 18, verse 2. They're coming across from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, across the sea from the west. And then we look at this map. And what do we see here? Ethiopia inferior. Ethiopia superior. Ethiopia superior. Ethiopia inferior up here. So this whole section up here, this is a 1737 map, 27 years after the other. This whole section over here was believed to be Ethiopia. It wasn't that little sliver we see today, or that little, portion over here today. It was all of this. And then if you come over here, notice you see Oceanus, Atlanticus, but you don't see any reference to the Ethiopian Sea or the Ethiopian Ocean. And I want to show you guys that real quick one more time. So right here, Atlantic Ocean, no Ethiopian Sea mentioned, no Ethiopian Ocean. Over here, you see a small section called the Ethiopian Sea, but this large section called the Atlantic Ocean. And prior to that, all of this was the Ethiopian Ocean, and you see the ships right there. So over time, it has changed from this over to the Atlantic Ocean with no reference of the Ethiopian Ocean or the Ethiopian Sea. But beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that nation shadowing with wings. And in case you guys aren't clear with what is being said here, let me go ahead and show you guys a map, a world map. And I'm going to show you guys what lies to the west of all of this, when they come across this sea. Because if all of this was considered Ethiopia, and it had to be a nation shouting with wings that comes from beyond there, across the sea, from the west, we're going to look over here. So the only thing across the sea to the west, shouting with wings, would be the United States. Now, Mexico also, I believe Mexico has a an eagle or a phoenix, but Mexico wasn't the ones, playing major roles in the slave trade. People were brought all in South America and up and through here and over here and all up in here and around over here and, worldwide. That's what the transatlantic slave trade was. So beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, across the sea, west, you end up over there. I mean, you don't have to believe it. I'm just saying it's sitting right there in the Bible. You can make of it what you will. So let's keep going because I don't want to get caught up in this part. It's so much stuff I want to go into. All right. So now 1865, you guys saw this on my last video. I brought up this brother right here, Henry Highland Garnet. Let the monster perish. 1865 is when slavery was officially abolished. He was born into slavery and he gives a sermon. And now I'm going to read a chunk of this sermon. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but his sermon, Let the Monster Perish, is about America and slavery. And in this sermon, he's going to compare America to Egypt. Now, again, there's many reasons for us to believe that Deuteronomy 28:68 is not about returning to literal Egypt on board ships. Because remember, they walked into Egypt, they walked out of Egypt. When they had to retreat from somewhere, they ran back into Egypt. There was no reason to take them into Egypt as a nation on ships. And even when we start to look at the history of how many were taken into Egypt when some of these people claim this was fulfilled, Deuteronomy 28, we see that it's not even 10% of the nation. It's a handful of people. But Israel as a nation was supposed to go into worldwide slavery, which means some would and some wouldn't. They would be scattered. So let me read this part. It says the nation has begun its exodus from worse than Egyptian bondage. I want to emphasize that part, worse than Egyptian bondage. And there's a reason. We're going to talk about some of this, more of this stuff in part 2. And I beseech you that you say to the people that they go forward with the assurance of God's favor in all things, done in obedience to his righteous will, and guided by day and by night by the pillars of cloud and fire. Let us not pause until we have reached the other and safe side of the stormy crimson sea. Let free men and patriots mete out complete and equal justice to all men, and thus prove to mankind through the superiority of our democratic Republican government. My goodness. As y'all can see, it's 2:24 a.m. where I'm at. I've been up. So I'm going to read that last sentence one more time. Let freemen and patriots mete out complete and equal justice to all men, and thus prove to mankind the superiority of our democratic Republican government. All right. So now this man who was born into slavery gives this speech 1865 and compares the American slavery. He says worse than Egypt. And this picture was taken in 1881. Worse than Egypt. If you guys want to look this up, go to blackpast.org, type in Henry Highland Garnet, or type in Let the Monster Perish, and you guys can pull up this whole sermon and read it for yourself. Link will be in the description. So now I'm gonna read this other chunk right here because I want to show you guys something. 1857. This is, oh my goodness, 8 years before the abolition of slavery. Abraham Lincoln, the Dred Scott decision and slavery. Here we go. Now, you got to understand, it wasn't just black people comparing slavery in America to that of Egypt. We even have Abraham Lincoln. This is from 1865, a picture from 1865. The Dred Scott decision handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court on March 6, 1857 was supposed to end the decades-long debate about slavery in the United States. It did just the opposite, inflaming passions, particularly in the North. In the following speech, Abraham Lincoln, then a private citizen, presented his critique of the decision in a speech in Springfield, Illinois on June 26, 1857. So now, I'm not going to read this whole speech. You guys can go type in Lincoln and read this speech on blackpast.org. But I am going to read a section here because Lincoln says something that I find interesting that I tried to make sense of it in context. It just seems oddly placed, and maybe it's the way they talked back then, and not necessarily the fact that it's oddly placed. Maybe it's just the way they talked back then. But I'll point it out when we get to it. I have said that the separation of the races is the only perfect preventative of amalgamation. I have no right to say all the members of the Republican Party are in favor of this, nor to say that as a party they are in favor of it. There is nothing in their platform directly on the subject, but I can say a very large proportion of its members are for it, and that the chief plank in their platform, opposition to the spread of slavery, is most favorable to that separation. Such separation, if ever affected at all, must be affected by colonization and no political party. As such, in now doing anything directly for colonization, party operations at present only favor or retard colonization incidentally. The enterprise is a difficult one, but when there is a will, there's a way. And what colonization needs most is a hearty will. Will springs from the two elements of moral sense and self-interest. Let us be brought to believe it is morally right and at the same time favorable to, or at least not against, our interest to transfer the African to his native clime. Now, either that means climate or home. I haven't looked it up, but I will. So if you guys know what clime is, type it in the chat. And we shall find a way to do it, however great the task may be. Now, what's interesting right here, I'm going to stop before I read the next part. Some of y'all probably reading ahead, but I'm going to stop right here. They wanted to send black people back to Africa. The Republicans. Hey, I'm just saying, the Republicans wanted to send black people back to Africa. Well, not even Republicans. Let's say Lincoln. Like he said, he's speaking for himself, not the Republicans. Lincoln thought it might be a good idea. The children of Israel, to such numbers as to include 400,000 fighting men, went out of Egyptian bondage in a body. I think it's interesting that he just switched to the children of Israel. The children of Israel, to such numbers as to include 400,000 fighting men, went out of Egyptian bondage in a body. How differently the respective courses of the Democratic and Republican parties incidentally bear on the question of forming a public sentiment for colonization is easy to see. The Republicans inculcate with whatever of ability they can that the Negro is a man, that his bondage is cruelly wrong, and that the field of his oppression ought not to be enlarged. Wait a minute. The Republicans were against Negroes being in bondage, and the Republicans were teaching that Negro is a man. But let's keep going. Again, know what y'all vote for. I'm not telling y'all to vote Republican or Democrat. Know what you're voting for. Know the history of who you're voting for. Don't make no excuses for it. The Democrats deny his manhood, deny or dwarf to insignificance the wrong of his bondage, so far as possible crush all sympathy for him, and cultivate and excite hatred and disgust against him, compliment themselves as union savers for doing so, and call the indefinite outspreading of his bondage a sacred right of self-government. The plainest print cannot be read through a gold eagle, and it will be ever hard to find many men who will send a slave to Liberia and pay his passage while they can send him to a new country, Kansas, for instance, and sell him for $1,500 and the rise. Y'all can go back through and read that yourselves. But basically, Abraham Lincoln is pointing out that the Republicans were against Negro bondage. Well, he was against it. The Republicans thought the bondage was cruel. They believed Negroes were men, and the Democrats denied that black people were even human. Go listen to some of the stuff Joe Biden said during the campaign. I can't believe there was black people that still voted for him. And that just shows the mentality of some of our people. They don't have enough self-respect to say, you know what, I'd rather not vote than to vote for somebody who is blatantly disrespectful to me and people who look like me. But again, it just tells you where we are as a people. Well, many of us, not all of us. All right, so this is interesting right here. The children of Israel, to such numbers as to include 400,000 fighting men, went out of Egyptian bondage in a body. Notice how everybody keeps talking about Egyptian bondage when they compare it to the situation in America. But when we do it, when us black people who claim to be Israel do it, they call it emotionalism. And yet we see it's been done forever. You can't help but to compare it to the Egyptian bondage in the Bible. Why? Because if we go back to Deuteronomy 28:68, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. Just so happens that our ancestors were brought over here in ships, and now people are comparing it to the Egyptian bondage. And we see one brother even say it's worse than the Egyptian bondage. Let's keep going. Where are we at? Let's go read Alexander Cromwell. I mentioned him before. 1863, 2 years before the end of slavery. Immigration and aid to the evangelization of Africa. In a sermon to Barbadian immigrants at Trinity Church, Monrovia, Liberia. Didn't we just see Lincoln mention Liberia? If I'm not mistaken, right here. The plainest print cannot be read through a gold eagle, and it will be ever hard to find many men who will send a slave to Liberia and pay his passage while they can send him to a new country. Wasn't Marcus Garvey trying to get black people back to Liberia? So this is 1857. And this speech is delivered in 1863, so 6 years later. And this is from Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 2. This is actually a summary of Deuteronomy, so I'm not going to read this first big chunk right here. It says, these words are part of that summing up of the Exodus. So as you see, he says he's summing up the Exodus. It says, made by Moses to the Israelites as he was on the eve of his departure, and they well nigh to the close of their journey through the wilderness. The whole process of their colonization was now about to close. That word colonization keeps coming up. The land of promise from the top of Pisgah was suffered to greet his eyes. Allotments of land, as the first lesson this evening showed us, had been given to 3 other tribes, and full preparations made for a new chieftain to lead them across Jordan into the promised inheritance of the Lord. The prophet avails himself of this pause in their history to relate unto them all the marked peculiarities of their history and migration, and to point out to them God's agency therein and his intents and purposes. They had been nigh 400 years in servitude in Egypt. That 400-year theme gonna keep coming up. Their fathers, during all their sojourn in that land, had suffered the keenest miseries and afflictions, but God had never suffered their bondage to be entirely, at any time, unmixed and absolute evil. In all their affliction he was afflicted, and the angel of his presence saved them, and in his love and his pity he redeemed them. And he goes on to give this speech, basically comparing black suffering to Egyptian bondage. Or black slavery in America to Egyptian bondage. So let's keep going. The Nile of North America. So now we're gonna come to another. We're gonna come to the actual physical places in North America which seem to imitate Egyptian geography. Because people say we're crazy for believing that America has any link to Egypt at all whatsoever. So we see people referencing the bondage of America with Egypt. And the reason I built up the Bible stuff just to show you guys, why we link it to America. And so now we're going to come to some of the physical stuff. This is published in 1993. This was not published by an Israelite to my knowledge. This is for the Chicago Tribune. As you can see, chicagotribune.com. The Nile of North America. I'm just going to read this small part at the top. Just to point out that there's a lot of references to Egypt in America. Some you may know about and some you may not. Campbellsville, Illinois, among the earliest discoveries made by archaeologists in this remote region of the state, was a complex system of nonverbal communication employed by the natives. There's a whole system of waving here in the Illinois River Valley, said archaeologist Ken Farnsworth. Depending on various factors, you lift either one finger, 2 fingers, or the whole hand off the steering wheel as you pass each other on the road. So we're talking about the Illinois River Valley. All right, and I'm gonna scroll down right here. We see it It's going to be called the Nile of North America. It says its deep past is what gives this town and region a vaulted status on equal to that of the Fertile Crescent of Asia, the Nile River Valley of Egypt, and the highlands of Peru, experts say. This is not just another river valley with lots of arrowheads. This is something special, said Farnsworth, who works at one of the largest independent archaeological research centers in the U.S., the Center for American Archaeology in Campbellsville. This is one of the half dozen places in the world we can view 10,000 years of human history. We call it the Nile of North America. Some people call the Mississippi River the Nile of North America as well. I don't know if that's an official nickname, but also the Kansas River called the Nile of North America because they are in the, the Illinois River, in the Illinois River Valley. So let's keep going. Memphis. Memphis is the name of a city in Egypt. And right here, this is Memphis. It's on hotels.com. 10 best things to do in Memphis. And right here, we see a giant pyramid. I believe this is a mall, if I'm not mistaken, or some kind of shopping center. But yeah, this right here, a pyramid. Right in Memphis. People say there's no connection. People say, oh, well, that's just coincidence. So we got Memphis right here on the river. What do we got right here? We got a pyramid right here on the river. But anyway, like I said, people think some of this stuff is coincidence, but you keep pulling at stuff and pulling at strings, and eventually you start to see some stuff. The Washington Monument. It's the Washington Monument right here. The Washington Monument was the tallest building in the world upon its completion in 1884. The Washington Monument, designed by Robert Mills and eventually completed by Thomas Casey and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, honors and memorializes George Washington at the center of the nation's capital. The structure was completed in 2 phases of construction, one private, 1848 to 1854, probably by slaves, and one public, 1876 to 1884. Built in the shape of an Egyptian obelisk, evoking the timelessness of ancient civilizations, the Washington Monument embodies the awe, respect, and gratitude the nation felt for its most essential founding father. So the Washington Monument was built in honor of George Washington, and it's an Egyptian obelisk. And you can see right here, phase 1, and then you see the completed one right here, modern day. And then right here is interesting. It says the aluminum, or aluminium for some of y'all, tip is placed on the top of the Washington Monument. It was the tallest building in the world upon its completion in 1884, standing 550 feet, 5.125 inches. So you see that right there? Looks like they're topping it with a pyramid. Looks like the obelisk is topped with a pyramid. I think that's an interesting thing. If you guys want to read this, the link will be in the description if you want to read this in its entirety about the Washington Monument. But this is on nps.gov, the National Park Service. Which brings us to this. Interesting. I'm just making observations. So we get to the US dollar. And a lot of people say a lot of things. So even the pyramid's on the money. But they want to tell you that America has no link to Egypt and that we're crazy for this. Y'all hit that thumbs up button, please. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button. I'm taking my time with this. I told you I'm going to take my time. And the reason I'm taking my time is because I want y'all to see this ending. This ending is so good. I love it. All right. So we have the dollar here. And I'm just gonna read some stuff. This is from the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, U.S. Department of the Treasury. I didn't realize I was going to do that. So Bureau of Engraving and Printing, U.S. Department of the Treasury. Let me come down to the bottom. There's some stuff I want to read at the bottom. Now, if anybody would know what the symbolism is, it's going to be them, or they're going to put out misinformation. It's going to be one of the two. They're going to tell the truth. They're going to put out misinformation. Y'all hit the thumbs up. Stay tuned for this ending. Obverse side of the Great Seal. The most prominent feature is the American bald eagle supporting the shield, or escutcheon, which is composed of 13 red and white stripes representing the original states and a blue top which unites the shield and represents Congress. The motto E pluribus unum, out of many one, alludes to this union. The olive branch and 13 arrows denote the power and peace of war, which is exclusively vested in Congress. All I'm gonna say is look up olive branches in scripture. You come to your own conclusion. The constellation of stars denotes a new state taking its place and rank among other sovereign powers. But here's what's interesting. The reverse side of the Great Seal. The pyramid signifies strength and duration. The eye over it and the motto in Nunc Coeptis, he, God, has favored our undertakings, alludes to the many interventions of providence in favor of the American cause. The date underneath is that of the Declaration of Independence, and the words under it, Novos Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, signifies the beginning of the new American era in 1776. So that's what they say the dollar means. I know some of y'all believe it means something different, and it may believe something way more in depth than that. But there's a lot of symbols on this dollar. We're gonna come back to some of this. I'm gonna let y'all. I don't want to give it away. Stay tuned to the ending. I'm trying not to say things. I'm trying to watch my words because I don't want to give away the ending. But y'all gonna love it. So this is Getty. Getty.edu. This is the Getty blog. Eagle as ideal ruler from the ancient world to the founding fathers. The bird of prey traveled a long way from ancient Egypt to Rome to medieval bestiary before landing in the U.S. From where? Ancient Egypt. So even the eagle is associated with Egypt. But somehow we're wrong. Now, I just want to take a moment. I want to take a moment because they said first they claimed that we were just making all this up. There was no evidence. And then slowly we just started, dropping all the evidence. And then they said that we were reading the scriptures wrong and that Deuteronomy 28 has nothing to do with us. But it was from reading Deuteronomy 28 that many people came to the conclusion that we were Israelites. And then we started taking DNA tests, and lo and behold, Limba started showing up, Moroccan Jew, North African Jew, Ethiopian Jew, Ashkenazi Jew, Jewcon, all the Jews started showing up. But that came from us supposedly reading scripture wrong and interpreting scripture wrong. And then now they're admitting that there were slaves on those ships in the transatlantic slave trade. And yet all of that supposedly came from us reading scripture wrong, us being too ignorant, us misinterpreting the Bible and taking it out of context. All of this has happened from us doing that. See, this is the narrative they want to push. And yet they won't admit that the reason we've gotten to this point in the conversation is because of Israel. Not because the church wanted to take the conversation here, but because they were forced to take the conversation here. Now they're telling us Deuteronomy 28:68 is wrong. And yet when we start digging, remember, there's going to be at least 2 parts to this series, maybe 3. We start digging and we start to see parallels from Egypt and the United States. See, if we were wrong this whole time, we never should have found not a shred of evidence that Israelites were ever in West Africa. And if we were wrong this whole time, we never should have found any evidence that Israelites were on board those slave ships. And if we were wrong, we never should have found any evidence that the Israelite culture existed at any way, shape, or form here in America. Slaves shouldn't have been singing Kumbaya and calling out to Yah. Harriet Tubman shouldn't have had a Hebrew name. She should have been from a tribe that's believed to be from the tribe of Simeon. Our DNA shouldn't be showing all the stuff it's showing in it. America shouldn't have all this Egyptian symbology and pyramids and rivers called the Nile. They shouldn't have an eagle that's associated with Egypt. All this from us supposedly reading it out of context. Everything. Scripture, prophecy, history. We're stupid. We don't know what we're talking about. Do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button. I'm gonna read from here. Most Americans are familiar with the symbol of the eagle. We see it on the backs of dollar bills and quarters, mounted on the podium during presidential speeches, and even representing sports teams. Where did this pervasive imagery come from? The founding fathers chose the bird to represent our country in 1782, but eagle imagery can be traced back much further back in time than that. Traits we commonly associate with the eagle, such as strength, shrewdness, and leadership, emerged in ancient Egypt over 4,000 years ago. The Romans appropriated eagle imagery when they conquered Egypt in 300 BC. They may have mistaken portrayals of Egyptians' patron deity Horus, who took the form of a falcon, for an eagle. At his birth, Horus was thought to have flown to the heavens and brought back light to a kingdom full of darkness, a feat that made him the symbol of an ideal ruler. The Romans incorporated this symbolic meaning into their own culture in 107 BC. Roman General Gaius Marius designated the eagle as the emblem of the Roman army, presenting Rome as the ideal ruler in the global sphere. The eagle goes back to Egypt. This is from Getty. For those of you who don't know who Getty is or what Getty is, Getty.edu. I'm going to read exactly right here. Getty advances and shares the world's visual art and cultural heritage for the benefit of all. Getty is a cultural and philanthropic institution dedicated to the presentation, conservation, and interpretation of the world's artistic legacy through the collective and individual work of its constituent programs: Getty Conservation Institute, Getty Foundation, J. Paul Getty Museum, and Getty Research Institute. Getty pursues its mission in Los Angeles and throughout the world, serving both the general interested public and a wide range of professional communities in order to promote a vital civil society through an understanding of the visual arts. So this is Getty.edu, not some random person's blog pushing their opinion. Eagle, AD 100, 200, Roman bronze, Getty Museum. The Americans got it from the Romans, and the Romans took it from the Egyptians. Link will be in description. You guys can go through and read through all this if you want to. You guys can link, same thing, read through all this if you want to. Now, I've shown this before. In Vegas, some people say, well, that Vegas has nothing to do with it. I mean, you can say that about every single image. You can say that about every single thing we bring up. Vegas has nothing to do with it. Memphis has nothing to do with it. The pyramid in Memphis has nothing to do with it. The eagle, even though that's associated with Egypt, that has nothing to do with it. The pyramid on the back of the dollar has nothing to do with it. None of this stuff has nothing to do with America being associated with Egypt in any way, shape, or form. It's just there. It's coincidence. It means nothing. This is what they want you to believe. So right here in Vegas, I see this almost on a daily basis. You have the Egyptian Sphinx. You have the pyramid. You have an obelisk. It's a whole thing. If you guys never been to the Luxor, it is interesting and amazing to see up close. And then this is at night. I've told you guys this before. They they change the bulb out so it's not as bright. But every night they shoot a big beam of light into the sky, pointing down like an arrow straight to Las Vegas. And I'm just pointing out the Egyptian stuff that we got here in the United States, right here. The entry to Luxor. When you come through here, I'm telling y'all go in here. These are huge, by the way, ridiculously huge. I'm gonna show you another picture so you have some context and just how big they are, because they don't look that big right here. But let me show you. This is a person right here, and this is the entrance. So when you see it back this way, it don't look all that big. But now when you see a person there, for those of you who've never been there, you see exactly how huge this is. This whole hotel is a monument to ancient Egypt. But let's keep going. Y'all make sure y'all hit the thumbs up button if you haven't already, because the finale is great. And so here is actual Luxor, Egypt, and it's showing how big the monuments are, and you can see the people down here. So as I was pointing out, this whole thing is a monument to ancient Egypt. And even up here, I believe that's the sun disk with Ra and the wings, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Let me see. I could be wrong. I'm not an Egyptologist. Chris Angel's here too in Vegas. If y'all ain't seen no Chris Angel stuff, it's kind of interesting. Right here, yeah, we can get in. We're not gonna get in all the iconography. Part 2. Make sure y'all subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Part 2 is coming. Press 1 if you've ever been to Luxor. Press 1 Hold on, don't press 1 yet. Press 1 if you've ever been to the Luxor in Vegas. Press 2 if you've ever been to Luxor, Egypt. Press 3 if you've been to both. 1 if you've only been to the Luxor in Vegas. 2 if you've been to the Luxor in Egypt. 3 if you've been to both. 0 if you haven't been to any of them. I've only been to the one in Vegas. Never been to the one in Egypt. All right, let's keep going. So right here we see Luxor, Egypt is down here. We seen Cairo, we seen Memphis is in this area earlier. So they're all down the Nile River, even though Luxor and Vegas is not down the Nile River or the Mississippi River or the Illinois River, any of that. All right, so Cairo, Illinois. It's gonna bring us back to Cairo, Illinois. We already looked at Memphis, and we looked at the what was it? The Illinois River Valley. Let me see. All right, right here, the Illinois River Valley. We looked at that, and they call it the Nile of North America. All right, let me get back over here. Let me not get sidetracked. So Cairo, Illinois. So they have a place called Cairo on the Nile of North America. These people telling us it don't have nothing to do with Egypt. It's just all this stuff is coincidence. Everything's a coincidence. Nothing means what it means. Black people are just stumbling into information, the correct information on accident, and somehow these people with the right interpretation, the right comprehension, and all this stuff, they missed all of this. They missed it all. They can't find none of this information. Why aren't they bringing out this information? Because they have an agenda to push. That's the only way I can see that they don't see this. They either don't see it or they know about it and they choose not to tell people because they have an agenda to push. Cairo, Illinois was once a booming city until racist violence destroyed the entire town. I think I highlighted something down here. Yep. Before it became Cairo, Illinois, the area was a fort and tannery for some of the first French traders who arrived in 1702. But their operation was cut short after Cherokee Indians slaughtered most of them. A century later, so 1802, the area at the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers became the subject of Lewis and Clark's first scientific study. Interesting. 15 years after that, John G. Comegys of Baltimore bought 1,800 acres there and named it Cairo in honor of the historic city of the same name on the Nile Delta in Egypt. Comegys hoped to turn Cairo into one of America's great cities. But he died 2 years later before his plans could be realized. The name, however, stuck. So Cairo is along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. And he named it in honor of the historic city on the Nile Delta in Egypt. So there's a Cairo in Illinois, which is located in the United States. But all this is coincidence. Just coincidence. We're getting close to the finale. What is Egyptomania? By Manon Schutz, University of Oxford. This is on nationaltrust.org.uk. So by Manon Schutz, University of Oxford. Y'all can come here and click her if you want to. I won't hear nothing about no secret scholars. And what do you have right here? You have a sphinx on each side guarding the entrances. The term Egyptomania, from Greek Egypto, Egypt, and mania, madness or fury, refers to the enthusiasm for everything that is related to ancient Egypt. This interest is not merely scientific, and Egyptianizing motifs have been adopted throughout visual culture, including architecture, on clothing, and jewelry. Although Egyptomania has been seen in many places and in many times, several peaks are especially noteworthy. All right, one more time. She's from the University of Oxford. What's to say right here? A trusted source article created in partnership with the University of Oxford. So when they be like, oh, all the sources have been debunked. They ain't debunked not one university source, not yet. None of them. None of them. Why Egyptomania? During the heights of Egyptomania, few people could afford to travel to Egypt in person. The only contact they had with Egypt was therefore through literature, art, and architecture, and it became representative of exoticism, romance, and mysticism. Moreover, popular tales about Egypt mostly circulated around the search for immortality and eternal love, reflecting people's innermost desires. Egyptomania therefore expresses these longings in a visual way through obelisks, sphinxes, pyramids, and all sorts of other collectibles. This is why I was showing you guys that we were building up to what it's called, why they have all this stuff. Cairo, they have a Nile of the North. They have pyramids in Vegas, pyramids in Memphis. They have a city named Memphis. They have sphinxes. Sphinxes is sphinxes or sphinxes? Let's say sphinxes. I hate trying to pronounce that H. Sphinxes, and they have pyramids and everything else. Those the entryway looks just like the Luxor, Egypt, because of Egyptomania. They are obsessed with Egypt. That's why you see it on the back of the dollar, the eagle, everything. They have a complete obsession with Egypt. It's called Egyptomania. I did not know that word before I started digging into this. That is a new word for me, Egyptomania. And the more we turn up, just like the reverse Underground Railroad, had no clue. But the more we start to dig, the more we turn up. The finale's coming. Make sure y'all hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you share this video. Let me not skip ahead. Oops, I almost did it. Egyptomania comes to America. This is from Stanford.edu, Stanford Libraries. And the reason I'm using university resources is because these people that claim that they've debunked all the sources, they claim that this has been thoroughly debunked, all of them. And yet we haven't seen any retractions come from any of the universities they claim to have debunked. They claim they debunked me, even though I'm sharing university sources. How are you debunking me if you haven't debunked the source of the information? That doesn't even make sense. But this is the narrative they have to push. Egyptomania comes to America. Historians often date the arrival of American Egyptomania to the 1820s, but the two books shown here reveal that American interest in ancient Egypt emerged much earlier, in the middle of the 18th century. So the 18th century would be the 1700s. So the middle would be around the 1750s. When was America established? 1776. I'm just saying. If we come down here, let me see. Let's just read this. You guys can read this whole thing on your own. One of the earliest images to show the Sphinx without a nose appeared in the Voyage d'Egypte et de Nubie, first published in 1755. A Danish naval officer, Frederick Ludwig Norden, sketched the magnificent temples and tombs of Egypt in 1737 to 1738 with exceptional precision. In 1759, Benjamin Franklin shipped a copy of Norden's Egypt from England to Philadelphia. Now I'm gonna show you guys the picture. A lot of people have circulated this picture. Now I'm just gonna show you. It is what it is. Some people have circulated it full with the nose on, and you have not seen it on BlackHistoryInTheBible.com for a reason. So right here it shows this with the nose off, but you see those lips there. We know the French shot the noses off because they didn't want people to they didn't want people talking about the fact that black people were building civilizations. And there's another part two. I'm gonna get into something in part two, which is interesting. I found a reference during I think it was just after slavery in the 1900s, where it talks about the redefining. They tried to redefine Ethiopians and Egyptians as something other than black or Negroes. And so I'm gonna show you guys that. Matter of fact, hold on. All right, I had to pull up something real quick. I wanted to do it before I forget while I'm on the train of thought. So this narrative that Egypt had nothing to do with black people, and they started running with this narrative because the Bible says that the Israelites were mistaken for Egyptians, and now all of a sudden Egypt has to be everybody so they can maintain the narrative that Israel looked like everybody and Israel wasn't Negroes. All this stuff is connected when it comes to the narrative that they choose to push. And so I found something. 1923, Bishop Randall Albert Carter, Whence and Whither. 1923. So this is what, 35, 58 years after slavery. So this is 58 years after slavery, and it's something interesting he notes, and I thought it was quite funny when I read it. So I do a lot of reading, as you guys can clearly see, but I don't understand anything I'm reading. It's always out of context, you know, that sort of thing. I have to twist the history because, you know, putting up 700 sources, it's possible to twist 700 sources to all mean what I want them to mean, because nothing in them actually points to what I'm actually reading. And then all the people that see it, they don't know what they're reading either. And so we're just all confused. We need their help. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and read this, and we'll let them put it into context for us later, for us ignorant black folks that don't know how to read books. Professor George Reisner of Harvard University has been conducting researches in the Sudan. He states that his researches have established that the culture of Ethiopia stood as an outpost of Egyptian civilization in Middle Africa, that in the art of the Ethiopian a Greek influence obtained, and that the invention of a script of their own was evident that the Ethiopians were a people of genius. The glory and grandeur that was Egypt's more than 3,000 years ago was disclosed recently when the tomb of King Tutankhamun, let me see if I can pronounce that right. Tutankhamun. I don't know. Let me stop it. Tutankhamun, I think that's the same person, was located and opened in the Valley of the King's Tombs. The way they got it split up like that just reads weird. Since the discoveries of the former greatness of the ancient Egyptians, you can sense the sarcasm in this. Let me read this over. Since the discoveries of the former greatness of the ancient Egyptians and Ethiopians, it has suddenly been discovered that they were not Negroes. The same Professor Reisner says the Ethiopians are not and were not African Negroes. He describes them as dark races in which brown prevailed. Hold on. I had to pull something up real quick. I'm gonna read this again because it's just funny. It's funny. It's the same thing we've been saying. Suddenly black don't mean black. People ain't black that was black. But let me read you something because this is gonna bring back some memories. I'm having a Matrix deja vu moment here. Since the discoveries of the former greatness of the ancient Egyptians and Ethiopians, it has suddenly been discovered that they were not Negroes. The same Professor Reisner says the Ethiopians are not and were not African Negroes. He describes them as dark races in which brown prevailed. I fear the learned professor would have a hard time convincing his own people that the dark colored races in which brown prevails in this country are not Negroes. Happily, you cannot sponge out ethnological facts with the bitter waters of race prejudice. The Negro has been called sons of Ham, African and Ethiopian in scornful derisions for all these years, and now it is too late to try to make him something else when it is discovered that these designations link him with the greatest civilizations of the past. As Negroes, therefore, we claim kinship with the ancient Ethiopians and Egyptians in all colored races and share the greatness and glory of their achievements and history. So this makes me think back to the Negro, a beast. And the sister that said that Zondervan was saying what they said because of a Negro, a beast. And I'm starting to think that Zondervan may have said what they said because Reisner, this professor that's being talked about here, Professor George Reisner of Harvard University, is being talked about here by Bishop Randall in 1923. He's going to use some of the same wording. The same Professor Reisner says the Ethiopians are not and were not African Negroes. He describes them as dark races in which brown prevailed. So let's go back to Zondervan. Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. So this all this other stuff we're not gonna get into about the curse of Canaan. But notice how he says Ham is a progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. What does it say right here? The Ethiopians are not and were not African Negroes. He describes them as dark races in which brown prevailed. Dark colored races in which brown prevailed. Right here, one more time. The youngest son of Noah, probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Since discoveries of the former greatness of ancient Egyptians and Ethiopians, it's suddenly been discovered that they were not Negroes. So this is something recent at his time in 1923. All I'm saying is it may be a connection between the Zondervan Bible and this Professor George Reisner at Harvard University. All I'm saying. All right. So now, told you I was going to be a part 2 to this. But this is not the finale. Now we're getting ready for the finale. Again, this connection right here, I think is interesting. I think the use of words right here, pointing out that the Ethiopian and Egyptians have suddenly been discovered were not Negroes, and that they were just dark races in which brown prevailed. And then we find the language of the Zondervan very closely resembles this. Not saying it's solid, not saying it's proof. So now, I brought a white bottle. Big old white bottle of medicine. Because somebody's been out here lying. Some of them have said nobody interpreted Deuteronomy 28:68 is Egypt before One West came along. And we found out that was a lie. Europeans have been interpreting it that way. Or I'll say this. They didn't interpret Deuteronomy 28:68, any of it, Deuteronomy 28, the curses, any of that, with or as prophecy that applied to people during that modern time. We found out that they did since the 1600s. They didn't apply it to black people specifically, but they were using it in the same way and context that many Israelites use it. So anybody from this point on, really from the point on that I made that video, that's teaching that it started with One West is just a deceiver. They haven't done enough research, and they shouldn't be speaking on the history if they don't know it. They have pushed a narrative over and over again. We're making up this link to Egypt. They've made this claim, and yet we've seen over and over again people, including Abraham Lincoln, have linked what happened in America to what happened in Egypt. And there's going to be an exodus. There's going to be an exodus to where it will no more be said that the Lord freed his people from the land of Egypt. I'm paraphrasing. But he freed them from the north and every other country they were scattered into. So a narrative is going to change. But I brought a big old bottle of white medicine for these people, because they say that we're twisting it. America has nothing to do with Egypt. This is just black people using emotionalism, and we're trying to make comparisons, even though we've seen it's been done since slavery. I want to show you guys something. Big old bottle of white medicine, fair use. Big old bottle of white medicine. I'll just keep saying it because I'm looking forward to doing this. We have Perry Stone. Perry Stone. Some of them call him heretical. Some of them do not. Now, before I play this, my mom used to try to get me interested in Perry Stone. She used to love Perry Stone's research into Israel. And I, at the time, wasn't into Israel. Now, remember when I wanted to debunk this, when I wanted to debunk the claims that black people were Israelites, I just hadn't studied it at all. I took that position. Well, I don't believe it, so therefore, let me try to debunk it, which is an ignorant position to take. But we see that Garfield and the other urban apologists, they take that position. He's not an urban apologist. He's an atheist as far as I know. But Garfield and those other guys take the position that they don't want to believe it. So what they want to do is debunk it, not research it to find out what's true or not, but they just want to push their agenda. We want to debunk this because we don't want to believe it. Fine, cool, whatever, do what you do. But the fact is, we have not been wrong about a whole lot of things, which is why their positions have changed. And so now this big old white bottle of medicine that's about to get poured out on them, I want you guys to listen to everything he says. I'm going to pause it like twice, but I want you guys to listen to everything this European Christian has to say about America and Egypt. It ties together everything that I've been pointing out tonight for those of you that are thinking, well, that's not proof. You just showed us a whole bunch of stuff. He about to tie it all together right now. He about to bring it all out.
That live here. These are the empires now, the order of Bible prophecy. The Greeks, a lot of people from Greece live here. We have, I said Babylon. Babylon would actually be Iran. A lot of Iranians, Mesopotamia live here. Romans, Italians, that's where my family came from Italy, live here. And so when you said that we're a melting pot, I want you to understand when he said that several programs ago, that we're talking about that America has all of the major empires of Bible prophecy, the ancestors or the descendants, I should say, of those empires that live here. Now, it is also true that America is one of those unique nations because we have patterns like ancient Rome, like ancient Israel, like ancient Babylon, and even like Egypt. Let me give you a couple of these. Number one, this is an Egyptian picture. The Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt. We have the Great Pyramid on the back of the $1 bill. The all-seeing eye of the pyramid is said to be the all-seeing eye of God. However, in Egypt, it was Horus or Ra who was looking down on the nation. The Washington Monument is an obelisk, which is actually, if we go back to Egypt, was a monument to the sun god Ra. And again, we're not saying that that's what we made it. Our founders took it and redeveloped it, but I'm saying
pay attention to this, the parallels of America and ancient Egypt. That's the name of it. Today on Manifest with Perry Stone, the parallels of America and ancient Egypt. This is uploaded March 13th, 2015. 2015, when many of us say that's, you know, the year we came into our awakening. Perry Stone uploaded a video called The Parallels of America and Ancient Egypt, and they want to push this narrative that the camps came up with all this stuff that we're talking about, One West doctrine. Let's see if they keep that same energy and say Perry Stone was teaching One West doctrine, but let's keep going.
This is Egypt. That's where it came from. We're just simply telling you where it came from. The Egyptian leader was called a young lion among the nations. Egypt had a 5-pointed star that represents the 5 forces of nature, and our flag has 5-pointed stars on our flag. The Statue of Liberty, which we call her Lady Liberty, was patterned similar after the Egyptian goddess Isis. The phoenix bird, which never dies but reemerges and redevelops itself, was actually the first bird representing America, and it was later changed to the eagle being, of course, an emblem of ancient Rome. Now, Bill, go back in with the people, because most people would not be aware of this unless they followed our ministry for many, many years. But back in the year 2008, it happened, oddly enough, the week of the inauguration. Tell us what was being read in the synagogue, in Jewish synagogues that week, and what we began to predict based on patterns.
Okay.
If you'll go back and go and talk about the patterns that we talked about.
Well, first of all, I want to go back to the first program we did in this series. I said, when we discuss all the different similarities, I'll get it out here in a minute, that we have with all these different ancient cultures. I said, if you're going to pin me to the mat, I'd say that America probably identifies more with Egypt than any other, and because of some.
Let me rewind that one more time. I think some people need a second dose of that medicine right there.
Similarities, I'll get it out here in a minute, that we have with all these different ancient cultures. I said, if you're going to pin me to the mat, I'd say that America probably identifies more with Egypt than any other, and because of some of the things that you just listed here. You know, the obelisk, the Washington Monument, that has direct links back to Egypt, and so on and so on. So that being said, when we saw the election results in 2008, of course the inauguration came in January 2009, I had already seen, and we had discussed, that the Torah portions, the way they were lining up, was interesting in this context.
The Torah being the 5 books of Moses that are read every week in the synagogue.
Right.
Hold on. They said back in 2008 to 2009, they're talking about the election of Barack Obama. They're trying to connect him with some stuff. That's beside the point. But they were using the Torah to see if things were lining up with prophecy. They said it was lining up with Torah portions. Isn't Deuteronomy part of the Torah? I'm just saying. This is a big old bottle of white medicine for them, because they say that One West came up with this stuff, and now they're talking about stuff is lining up with Torah. So clearly somebody sees something in the Torah as prophecies and not as fulfilled events. But let's keep going. And they're associating it with Egypt. And he said, America, if you had to pin them to something, America lines up more with Egypt than any other ancient culture.
They're divided up into different portions.
Yes.
All right, so when we get into January 2009, specifically on the day of the inauguration, or that week, the Torah portion is called Shemot, which is, we would say, Exodus, and it's the beginning of the story of the Exodus. And in that Torah portion, it talks about how that after the death of Joseph and that generation, how there arose a king who didn't know Joseph, and which is to be understood to mean, it's not that he didn't know who he was, it's just that he didn't regard him. He didn't respect him. And you have to keep in mind that Joseph is why Egypt became the superpower that it was.
All right. So now Joseph is the reason Egypt became a superpower. It was, and Joseph was an Israelite. He was one of the first, well, I ain't gonna say the first, but one of the first Israelites. And what's the reason America became what it has become as a superpower? Because America took Israelites and had Israelites build the country, just like the Israelites built the treasure cities of Pithom and Ramses in the Bible. America, wanting to be the second Egypt, took them some Israelites, and they tried to have a treasure nation built by these Israelite slaves.
So he didn't respect or regard that which made Egypt great, but actually began to see God's people in Egypt as a threat. They're more and mightier than we are. And so he goes to his counselors, and he says, we need to devise a very wise plan how to keep these people down. Well,
I want y'all to listen to this. I'm going to rewind it just a little bit. I want y'all to listen. Remember what I was saying. If you go back and watch, yes, some slaves believe they were Israelites, part 2, I talked about the fact that they didn't want us reading this book because it might incite rebellion. Now, he's not referring to, Negroes, black people, African Americans, whatever you want to call us. He's not referring to that. But I just think some of the stuff he's saying is interesting, because if you listen to what he's saying, this is exactly what's been done to us in the past, and it's exactly what's being done to us now. As far as the narratives being pushed, they want to silence us. They want us to shut up. They want us to stop with this Israelite thing.
Egypt as a threat. They're more and mightier than we are. And so he goes to his counselors, and he says, we need to devise a very wise plan how to keep these people down. Well, the first thing, once again, is the inauguration in January 2009 coincided with the Torah portion, which included this new king who arose, who didn't know Joseph, who identified God's people as the enemy, and who began, along with those in his government, for lack of a better word, began to implement policies that were designed to keep God's people subjected and in the land to be, more or less, to use modern vernacular, their tax base.
To keep them in the land and to be their tax base. You guys go watch this video on your own. So I'm going to be pouring out some more medicine out of this bottle in part 2. If y'all have not hit the thumbs up button yet, please do so. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Click the notification bell, turn on all notifications, and please share this video. We're going to start tying some more stuff together. A lot of it may seem random right now, but there's a method to my madness. All of this stuff is going to be tied together in part 2. So I just wanted to give you guys some groundwork, show you guys that there are a lot of parallels. There are even more. The reason I couldn't do it in one video, because I didn't want to make a 4-hour, 5-hour video. So the next one will probably be about hour and a half, and be for a total of 3 hours. We'll break it up. So anyway, if you guys like the video, hit 1 in the chat, please. if you guys love the video, hit one in the chat and go share this video on Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere else. If you guys have any sources on Egypt that you would like to see included in the next video in part 2, please send them over. It may turn into a part 3 depending on how many I get. But yeah, definitely, if you guys have some stuff on America being linked to Egypt, feel free to send it over. We're going to keep telling the truth and shaming these devils that are lying, trying to push a narrative, claiming that Deuteronomy is one West doctrine. We're reading the Torah wrong. We're reading the rest of the book wrong. All of that stuff. So more medicine from this big old white bottle coming next or in part 2. So with that said, till next time, I'm out.